Good morning. It's morning where I am. Every nation has its time zone based upon the orbit of the sun or the orbit of the earth around the sun, depending upon your perspective. I'm tending towards the flat earth belief, but I'm not fully convinced. I'm still researching it. But this isn't about flat earthism. This isn't about evolutionism. This isn't about conspiracy theory. This isn't about the games I play with both adults and children around my hometown. This isn't about the revolution. This isn't about the rebellion. This isn't about the civil war in America or the very real war in Ukraine. This isn't political. This is about mental health. Now, I have in the past suffered from some serious mental health issues. I was diagnosed paranoid schizophrenic. They tried to re-diagnose me. I resisted that re-diagnosis. It was drug-induced psychosis, the diagnosis they tried to pin on me. Ridiculous. I've never taken that many drugs. So I resisted it and managed to win in that attempted re-diagnosis. My official diagnosis is still paranoid schizophrenic. It's a very serious illness. You think people are talking about you, and you react in the most unusual ways. You have hallucinations, both auditory and visual. It's a very serious condition. You have fantasies which seem real. You have grandiose thoughts. You think you're someone special, when in fact you're a bit of a nobody. Or you have the opposite, the reverse of grandiosity, the idea that you're the worst person in the world. You're not worth anything. You're not worth life. If you're worth nothing, you might as well slash your wrists or drink a bottle of bleach. You might as well. After all, you're worth nothing. That's how serious it is. Now, if you read certain papers, in the UK, we have a paper called the Daily Mail, which routinely, this is my teddy bear, by the way, he's called Grouch. He's my pet dog. I play games with him, but I'm a bit nuts. Don't worry, I may be recovered from mental illness, but I'm still pretty insane, really. Everyone that knows me will attest to that. I'm going to take my anti-anxiety medication. I get anxious, especially when talking in public, and I'm going to post this online. So I'm getting a bit anxious, so I'm going to take my anti-anxiety medication. It helps with anxiety. How do you recover? Oh no, I've changed subject. I've forgotten where I was. How do you recover from mental illness? Well, it's certainly not through the drugs. The drugs which the psychiatrist gives you, or rather your nurse gives you on the instruction of the psychiatrist, they don't cure you. They're what's called palliative medication. They dull your emotions, they dull your thoughts. Most of them prevent the chemical known as dopamine. You know, dopamine. Dopamine is the kind of naturally created drug in your brain and nervous system which allows you to feel happiness, allows you to fantasize, allows you to dream. They dampen dopamine. So when you're on this palliative medication that the psychiatrists prescribe, you're unable to feel emotion. You're unable to dream. You're unable to feel. It's why you see all these mentally ill people going around like zombies. They're over-medicated. It's not the illness that why they're walking around like zombies, it's the medication. The medication has zombified them. Now, I resist psychiatric medication. I don't think anyone should be on it, except in some very extreme cases where there's a very real risk of suicide. I have to take my medication. I'm under a court order. And people think I'm so nuts, I'm a danger to people. I don't know why. I've never hurt anyone in my life. Never will. But why would they believe me? I'm a paranoid schizophrenic. I can't be trusted in their eyes. You see, what we find is that this palliative medication actually prevents people being human. An overactive imagination. Let's medicate it. Let's control this man. He's thinking too much. He's dreaming too much. He's lost touch with reality. Let's medicate him. That's their attitude. There's a rapper called Truth Seeker that sings about it. Overactive imagination, medicate it. How do you recover? Well, I've recovered, by and large. I'm able to operate in society pretty easily without medication. I get into trouble, but hey, I'm a rebel. Of course I'd get into trouble. How do you recover from mental illness? Well, first off, there's two things you need to deal with first. That's the paranoia and the depression. Most mentally ill people suffer from depression and anxiety. Anxiety can't go away. Anti-anxiety medication. You can't treat anxiety. You can take beta blockers, which calm the heart, but they don't get rid of the anxiety. This does. So you can't get rid of the anxiety. You can merely medicate it through cigarettes or alcohol, or worse, drugs. Street drugs I'm talking about, not, you know what I mean. But you can deal with the paranoia and depression. The first key to getting over paranoia is to realise that most people are so caught up in themselves, so busy with their lives, that they've no time to even notice you. They're not talking about you. They're so caught up in themselves, they don't even notice you. They're not talking about you. Even your friends are so caught up in their own little worlds. They're not talking about you. If you realise that deep down, you get over your paranoia. That's how I did it. You realise that people are so caught up in themselves that they've just no time to talk about anybody else. That can get you over your paranoia. When I realise I am so unimportant and people are so caught up in their own little lives that they've no time to even notice me, let alone talk about me, that helps me over my paranoia. Depression's more tricky. A positive thinking attitude. But how, when you're in the pits of despair, do you get a positive thinking attitude? Well, the first thing is to come off antidepressants. See, you can't think clearly whilst on antidepressants because you haven't got any of that serotonin that helps normal thinking. So the first thing to do is get off the psychiatric drugs. Then you can recover from depression. Now, I came off antidepressants. It took about a year before I'd overcome the addiction to them. The withdrawal effects of the antidepressants I was on lasted for about a year. For that year, I spent a 24/7 period. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for an entire year wanting to slash my wrists. That's how addictive antidepressants are. But once that year was over, wow. What a release. What a release. I realised, right, I've got this serotonin back. I've got this dopamine back. I can think positively. I can dream big. I can think good things about myself. I don't have to think of myself as a nutter anymore. I can think big. I'm off this bloody drug. I can think big. So I started dreaming. I set up my own business. I did all sorts of stuff. It fell flat. Don't worry, I'm not a very good businessman. But I dreamed big. And that's how I got over depression. I'm not depressed anymore. Oh yes, I do get depressed sometimes. Don't worry, sometimes I have one of those days where I just don't want to face a single soul. I just want to hide away in a corner and die. I do have those days still, but everyone does. That's not mental illness. Everyone has those days. Most of us just pull ourselves together and get on with it. So that's a couple of tips for you. Don't try and overcome anxiety. It can't be done. Exercise helps with anxiety. Exercise. Walking, running, tai chi, boxing, whatever. And this helps with anxiety. There is no psychiatric drug that will help with that anxiety. It doesn't exist. Beta blockers don't work. And they're the only one that are prescribed. But depression, you can overcome through positive thinking. And paranoia through reasoned thinking. But first, you need to have that serotonin and dopamine flowing through your brain and your nervous system. Until you get those naturally created chemicals flowing naturally through your body without being medicated, you have no hope of recovering from mental illness. Okay? Come off the drugs. Mentally ill people, please.